All right, so at 6:05, we're calling the meeting to order. So first, we'll start with attendance. Stephanie?
Kelsey Waits,
Here.
Dave Pemble,
Here.
Stephanie Mullen here, Brian Davis,
Here.
Scott Gergen,
Here.
Lisa Hadeen, here, Becky Beisel is still getting set up.
Okay. All right. So at this point, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in, any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? All right, motion carries. So tonight, we're really just focusing on some items for discussion, beginning with reviewing the district plan for implementing the governor's recent executive order regarding school closures.
Okay, so I'll go to the microphone.
And so I think part of the meeting is not only for the board to get fully up to speed, but also to start communicating to the community, because on the timetable that we're at, we'd like to really begin promoting some aspects of this plan Thursday, and we want to make sure that we have board feedback before we make that the final communications that we're sending out. So the documents that you have in board book, the first thing is the school closure guidance plan that the, we'll pause for just a moment.
Talk now.
We good?
I think so.
Okay. Do you hear okay?
Can you guys hear?
The greatest, I'm going to work. Can't see anything either.
See the tiles are right through there.
We're gonna need to be right next to him in order to hear him.
Okay.
Okay. Are we going back live again? So the school closure plan that you have, there, we're looking at the version of March 17th. So since the executive order last Sunday, there's been a new version that's gone out every day, and they've highlighted the changes. So I have a paper copy in front of me too as well, so I can flip through it. But whenever you have a paper copy, just check the date, because there may be changes from the copy that you have. They're keeping them posted on the MDE site, the updates. They also have switched this week to a 4:30 p.m. Conference call, superintendents and the commissioner, which just for today's just ended a little while ago. And so you have the document so you can see the full scope of what they're recommending that schools to do. I'm just going to highlight a few things and then see if there are questions about that. I'll go through each of the documents that are in board book, and then we'll look at the communication we want to start putting out there potentially as the district's official communication on the plan moving forward. So it was the governor's executive order 20-02 that put all this into process, and the governor closed schools from March 18th to March 27th. And although we're anticipating March 30th moving forward with the distance learning plan, when you look at the executive order, they haven't put that into action yet. That's not the official direction. It's to close and plan for it. And so obviously schools that were in session this week had to close on March 18th or by March 18th. We were on spring break, so we're making a plan that goes into effect March 23rd to March 27th to prepare for distance learning. The next part there's the heading distance learning, and the commissioner has made it clear, and it's taken some retraining of some people's brains, like mine, who just switched from distance learning, which was used in one community, to e-learning, which is what we use for our weather-impacted school substitutions for alternate learning. Because e-learning is in statute for weather-related events, and if you were trying to claim the 5 days that you could get funding for those 5 days, this is distance learning, and this is basically the governor through the commissioner saying you will get credit for any school days if you do distance learning during and following the executive order. And that's a key part because we don't want to have to apply for aid for those days. So we'll have everybody sync back up to the term distance learning if we engage that on March 30th. We do need to track attendance for both students and staff. The staff, not only so we can keep track of the fact that the governor has decreed that everybody gets paid, everybody that's associated with the school operation gets paid, including contractors. So we want to know how our staff is doing so we know what their availability is, and we also want them to code their absence so that we're getting paid. And if there are people who are choosing not to come back, we have to remind them that the governor has ordered them to report for work with exceptions, and if they're not in those exceptions, they need to come to work. So we're tracking the staff attendance. We're getting funded on our average daily membership, weighted at the different age groups or grade levels of students. So we will have to, in our distance learning plan, track daily attendance. And that's something that the particulars are getting worked out, and then we could continue to work that out during our planning week next week. So whether it's a check-in or some other active connection with students that shows that they were participating. And of course, students are required to participate under the Minnesota compulsory attendance law. If they're healthy, they should be participating. They should be excused with a lawful excuse if they're not going to participate in distance learning. Then the other part that's really significant, the next heading is care for children of families of emergency workers. That was spelled out in the executive order that we must provide care to, at a minimum, district and charter enrolled students aged 12 and under who are children of emergency workers critical to the state's response to COVID-19. So you have to read into that a little bit, that they are students that were already enrolled in the district. So that's our kindergartners and up. We don't have state funding for preschool other than school readiness. They're not considered actual weighted students for this purpose. So that's where we're offering our child care for emergency workers from kindergarten all the way up to age 12. Grade is distinct at age 12 because it literally says age 12 in the executive order. As I mentioned last night, they added another tier of workers. They had initial tier 1 emergency workers that we are mandated to provide child care for during the regular hours of school operation. And now they've added tier 2 workers, which they're asking us to make every effort to provide care for. And then in tier 2, they also added educational staff. And the intent was that each district would support the students in their district regardless of where their parents were educational staff. And since then, in our plan, we'll tell you how we're reacting to that, but I just wanted to stick strictly to what was in the guidelines based on the executive order. Nutrition, the district, which is the next heading, districts must ensure meals are available to all students who need them. And we're using a summer food service program option to create reimbursement for meals that we are distributing. We did that immediately on Monday morning, and we have sites identified where we are preparing food, and then we're distributing it out to other sites through mechanisms that we'll share in our plan. And it's a maximum of 2 meals or snacks per site per day. We'll talk about why that's important in our plan. There's a lot of other components of the guidelines, making sure that we're looking out for the whole child. With mental health and well-being, we are required to continue to provide other services that support students. They're just going to look different. We have to make sure that there's no bullying or harassment of anybody connected to how they react to this, whether it's mental health or their ethnic background or anything like that. We want to support mental health. Students are required to attend, so now I'm on page 9, attendance and truancy. Special education services, individualized education programs and 504 plans. We are required to provide those mandated services, but of course they will look a little bit different than a regular school day. So in this section, it ensures that students with disabilities will continue to receive specialized instruction and related services through a distance learning model to meet their identified needs. So we get a little bit of a break on some of the deadlines as things get sorted out, and then we find an alternate way to continue to do all the things from due process to delivery of instruction, therapeutic activities, and so forth. Then there's a question and answer session on that. English learners is another category where we want to continue to support English learners with the same type of things they would get in their mainstream activities, scaffolding, support from individual staff members, resources that can be made available to them. We need to continue to support anybody eligible under the McKinney-Vento Act, so people that have homelessness or housing instability, people that are displaced. There is direction on how to continue to reach out to those families and provide services. Our McKinney-Vento liaison is Molly Cirillo, and she'll be working with the full team of social workers to not only prepare a plan, but actually contact and, in some cases, deliver services to students and their families that meet that category or those criteria. Early learning is a little bit confusing as far as how that's laid out for us. Community education programs such as early childhood, family education, and school readiness will not be required to be included in your district's distance learning plan. So we will include preschool, our regular preschool, in our distance learning plan with developmentally appropriate activities, but we won't be reaching out to the full spectrum of things that are offered in community education. Early childhood special education does need to be delivered, and that's going to look different, and we've got a capable squad of staff that are going to be specifically following up on all those individual cases. With the child care programs, if it is not a regular school enrollment program, we're actually not allowed to continue those on March 23rd. So our district has continued those this week because we were in the transition from when schools closed down and people did not have a chance to make plans, and we weren't closed down by order, but we are required to close on March 23rd. So that will create a significant gap for families in this community that they don't have the school option preschool. They'll have to find other preschool or take care of things within their families. And I'm sure it'll be a continued topic of discussion how that gets met. But we will be shifting our child care programs to serve only those that are eligible as Tier 1, Tier 2, or district employees in our plan that we'll talk about next. Statewide testing, there are no statewide tests during this period, and if we continue on and proceed with distance learning, there is no plan to continue on with state tests. Things like the ACT have an alternate date in June nationwide that are set, and that'll be determined later if that will continue on at that date. And whether there'll be MCAs or any other exams like that, we don't know. We just know during this period of the executive order, there's no testing. Obviously, our distance learning lessons want to continue to prepare students to be successful on those standards-based tests. So on page 19, you see before and after care. I was alluding to that earlier. All before and after care, school-age care programs provided in school are suspended until in-person school resumes. So that will begin on the 23rd. Page 20 has tribal considerations. We talked about that regarding our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. Right now, the distance learning is intended to be equitable for all students, and should we need to adapt anything for students that have any tribal considerations, we would consult with that team, that advisory group, to find out. Obviously, for distance learning, the state does not expect that it's all electronic, that it's all done online. That's one way that we can do that. We can also hand out assignments in various formats, textbooks, whatever the case may be. We can provide technology for students to work from other locations, and we can even issue hotspots and things like that to help kids get connected. We can park buses with hotspots in neighborhoods and do all kinds of things like that to try to enable those plans that do have an online component that students would benefit from, grades 5 or higher. Grades 4 and lower are going to have more traditional based resources to work with. And if we do actually engage in this mandatory distance learning, we'll make sure that we're getting out the communication to people about free or trial or reduced price services that are available for people that don't have connections. So we do have a lot of resources to pull that together when we get to that point. Right now, the energy beginning on the 23rd, and already the team that's been working on distance learning in advance is primarily focusing on the content, and then eventually they'll shift to getting word out on how to capabilize that those programs. And we talked about funding. The state is intending to fund us like a regular school year. So we are keeping track of students. We are eligible for federal funding, block grants and things like that. Everything should continue the same. And the reason why the state is making sure that they're telling us that is because the state is also telling everybody that they're getting paid. And so without that, each district would be eating into its own reserves. It's also the reason why preschool or any preschool program, early childhood family education, or anything else that is not receiving any funding, if that stops on the 23rd, we'd have to make a decision to offer anything that's allowed under this executive order or perhaps a future one. We'd have to decide if we're going to pay for that, because there would be no reimbursement, and community ed would it'd be a detriment to community ed. So that's really a part of analyzing our plan in a few moments, is to see to make you aware of how we are implementing all the components of the governor's executive order, but then also to see, does that really hit all the challenges that our community has, and is there something else, knowing that we'd be most likely paying for it ourselves? Are there other things that we feel that as a Board of Education that you would like to try to pick up on? And then we have the actual executive order, which you can get at the website, the MDE website, if you want to read the actual order, or the letter from the commissioner. There's also a document which is included in your packet, which has been progressively evolving, which is the categories of emergency workers. And what we have found in these hours of preparing this week, our communications with families, we're doing internal communications, external communications, is the more we link to MDE or to the state of Minnesota or to any of these places that are part of this executive order and direct people to the links, as they change them dynamically, people will get that accurate information. Anything we do in paper, anytime we send out even an infinite campus message, it could change after we send it out. In fact, could change while we're sending it out. So we're also trying to mirror the language that they're using, because sometimes they're introducing language that people aren't familiar with. Sometimes they're introducing language that we use in different ways in different contexts. And so in this emergency workers, of course, everybody has an image of what an emergency worker is. They literally spell it out, occupation by occupation, what they consider tier 1, and that's what they call it. It's a part of the executive order is tier 1. Tier 2, which they have now developed since yesterday, is another group of workers who are obviously important, as just about every occupation is important to keeping our world and our economy running. We are not mandated to provide childcare during the school days for tier 2 workers, which includes educators. We're also not mandated to provide childcare for educators who do not work in our district. That is something that in our plan we're recommending that we do. And it may create some extra costs, depends on how well we're repurposing our staff to meet the needs of those kids. It may not cost us, it may cost very little extra beyond our operations in this phase. So we'll talk about that specifically to our plan. Another document that you have is a Q&A document, and that one changes daily. So I have the March 17th Q&A document. A lot of questions refining emergency workers and things like that. I think we've covered all those already. And then I just want to cover a few things that the district has been putting into progress this week before we go to actually what we hope to be not only notifying our community, educating them about what we're going to do, because we have the luxury with this conveniently placed spring break to have a few days to roll it out. Obviously, there are schools who were in session this week and had to begin the next day with their plans. Today was that day, and so we've heard mixed results about how things have been rolled out, but everybody obviously is putting their best foot forward, and we get to learn from what we see those people doing as well. We decided to create a Raider update, which is an internal document that goes to all of our staff, and it's basically going out every day because it's so hard to get the wording right and to craft these messages about specific parts, and sometimes it's about as much as anybody can absorb in a day before you mix 5 other topics in. So we've been kind of dialing it in as to what is the next logical thing for people to know, or what are the updates that they need to know. Goes to our entire staff, it's going to the board. We are adding partners upon their request. So the city of Hastings has asked to be a part of that. We've added some of their key staff positions to get that. They get to do whatever they want with it. They skim it and delete it, or they say, hey, we can partner on that, or it's really good to know that there's gonna be buses running around town starting on Monday because we didn't think that they were. So them seeing that is important, and if other community partners, besides the list that we started out with, ask us to join on that, we can. There's nothing confidential in that, but it's not intended for the broader audience. We're using Infinite Campus to send messages directly to parents, and we are posting a daily update on our website. And because all this is new, sometimes we find out, oh, the website doesn't allow us to change the date daily on the posting without changing the whole image. And so we're working through those, but we are getting stuff up there and putting it in sequential order. So if somebody does come back from out of town, or wherever they were kind of off the grid on vacation or whatever, they can come back and read them in a series. So a couple other things to highlight before we switch to our first draft of direct communication. And I will also say that the communication we talked about, it should be educational or informative, but we also want to promote some things, and I don't want to lose track of that. Tomorrow, I'm doing an interview with KDWA. I've scheduled an interview with the Hastings Gazette. I'll work with any media outlet, including our own social media and our own district communications, because there's a tremendous advantage to us to getting participation on some of these key parts. And so we don't want to just say, this is what we're doing if you want to do it. We really want to promote the advantage of it, and we'll talk about specifically why. And another reason for this meeting is for you to reflect back. Here's some other ways you can promote it, or here's some key parts that would be clearer, because we've been in, I tell everybody we have to keep an extra gear because we haven't got to that emergency phase, but we're in that crisis working mode here this week. And we can get so caught up in that we don't see the forest for the trees. So you're here to help us with that. And also nutrition and transportation are 2 huge components here, and it's spring break. So for example, our director of business operations is on vacation in Florida, and our food service coordinator is transitioning to another district and is almost finished in our district, and has been kind enough to kind of deal with both places at one time to share what's going back and forth. So that team's been in that mode, cranking these things out, and they've been doing a great job. They've put away their shopping trips and their ski days out and whatever they were planning on doing spring break to be here, all hands on deck if they could. So that's really been helpful. Last of those points, obviously we talked about there's a lot more we can do with getting technology out once we get to that point. We are planning on continuing construction projects that are a part of the bond. That is really, if the contractor doesn't have staff available because of illness, or they're restricting the movement of their staff, that's just something we're going to have to deal with. But we are not restricting them because they're able to work, under the current guidelines for social distancing, and there'll be very few students, and Staff are going to be strategically placed, and they're generally not in their work areas anyway, so we'll take it case by case if we need to, but we want to allow them to continue to work on construction if they can. Talk about ACT. So you probably already are familiar that during the week we, step by step, we shut things down under the community education umbrella. The last thing we talked about today was they're canceling behind the wheel exams, and we had been allowing up until today, if a student is healthy and the instructor is healthy and they want to do their behind the wheel so that we don't get a big log jam, to continue. But today we shut them down because they can't take the test anyway, and it's getting to the point where if the end product is shut down, we probably shouldn't make the decision to, at a local level, to proceed. So literally everything from the senior programs who were at higher risk being shut down last week, some of them we shut down last week, to everything being shut down this year. So now that staff will report on the 23rd. Everybody that works at Tilden will report on the 23rd, and they'll get together their plan for who needs to do things to support childcare, who needs to support distance learning for preschool and up, and who is available to go to other parts of the district, because people will be, our staff will be shifting all over the place to meet these individual demands for novel things that we didn't ever have before. We talked about Raider update. Officially, distance learning has not been directed. We've been directed to prepare. And so there will be something that gets splashed all over the media saying, now the governor and the commissioner are saying do this or don't do that. We are engaging social distancing and all those things that are part of the executive order, and nationwide are the recommendations. We're trying to incorporate them everywhere. We're reminding each other. We're helping each other out with that. And of course, we do have people who are recovering from illness or are now starting to come down with illness, and we're trying to be as conservative as we can with that and get them out of there. I will tell you that on these daily calls from the commissioner, with people starting the shutdown today for districts that were supposed to have school, it became very controversial that some schools were allowing teachers to work from remote locations, and others were following the letter of the executive order, and it became quite heated in that call, and that's going to be worked out yet. The ultimate thing that the commissioner said is the executive order, and I think we all know what an executive order means. It doesn't mean make up your own plan. It means follow the order. However, if we are following the order and at any point we are going against public health guidelines, such as we are a school without a lot of space, or we have, first example comes to mind is Rochester, but it could be Minneapolis or any other place that's a hub for medical and health care, that they need to have so many kids come to school that there's not space to space them out with 10 or less in a room, and whatever the case may be, that they can start sending staff home as soon as they feel like they have to. So that's where the rub is there's ethics involved here. There's the schools that need to do it and the schools that just chose to do it, and that's going to be played out some more as we go through here. I think everything else is a part of our walkthrough that we're doing here, and like I said, we're already starting to make plans for shifting staff. I will say that when you compare this to our e-learning plan for weather-impacted events, not everybody's going to agree that the master agreement says this or the master agreement says that. Master agreement did not have anything in there about this type of emergency. It's an executive order, so that supersedes some parts of our master agreement, and we have a official guideline, provisions for the closing of schools due to inclement weather or other emergency. It doesn't outline all the emergencies, but it says, in situations not anticipated by the provisions of this document, and this is one, the superintendent shall make the sole determination on how the situation shall be addressed. So we're really trying to build in all these exceptions about, I can't come to work because I was exposed to this, or I just came from a cruise, or I am caring for somebody who's immune compromised, or whatever it is, that they work through their supervisor, they work through the organizational chart that we have, and ultimately they're going to get a decision, and they're going to be expected, to follow that decision. If there's a grievance, if there's any other action that they want to take, they can do that. But there has to be some system for determining these, because there could be so many individual things that rise up to needing a customized decision. And once again, in that same policy, it says only the superintendent or his or her specifically authorized representative may approve a school closing. So right now, the governor closed us. In the future, if we have the authority to open up again, obviously the board will be a part of consulting on, are we going to open up? When do we feel that Hastings is ready to open back up and have regular school? All right, so I will take any questions just on the part that comes straight from the state of Minnesota, and then we'll roll into how we plan to implement and communicate the actual logistics of doing what's in the executive order in the Hastings version 1.0.
Anyone have any questions?
I don't have any questions specific to the governor's order. I think as we roll into the specifics of what that looks like here, there'll be just some questions and feedback.
Okay, so then,
Sorry, not a question, just remember that when you're talking, since we only have a microphone up there, and then we have the wonderful people, so we have our admin team and Becky on the computer, that if you do have any questions, just make sure you, for anything lengthy, to go up there or to speak up so that everybody can hear it.
Is our admin team set up on board book, so will I see them raise their hand?
Yes, they,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
My suggestion would be that if it's not, as long as it's not a long question, it's probably more efficient for Jeff to just repeat it
Yeah.
rather than us getting up and down.
Yes.
sure, I'm open to that. Okay, so I'll begin with this response, and we'll go through it and pause after each of the 3 items on there. So Sunday, obviously, things got real fast. And so because we didn't have school on Monday, we chose to meet Monday morning instead of coming in on Sunday. But you can imagine we had communications going back and forth from wherever we were on Sunday. We wanted to unpack the executive order and start looking at how we roll that out in Hastings. It's evolved because the executive order and the guidelines have changed, sometimes minute by minute, certainly day by day. And we have access to some staff working on site to help with this, some staff that are key leadership positions not available or limited availability, and then of course we have the vast majority of our staff on spring break as they're supposed to be. So as we work through this, we were still having meetings, and we've broken into task force teams and been breaking this apart with not only areas of expertise, but also people kind of cross-referencing. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm going to be a part of the group and give you feedback from a different perspective. So that's really worked well, and very appreciative of the effort of the staff and the leadership group in doing that. Some of these decisions that are on this document literally came together right before I came over here and typed it. And so we're looking for typos, we're looking for anything else as we go through these. This is not final, but the goal is, if we answer questions, have board input, and have your support, we'd like to start not only, I said, getting it out, communicating to people, but really promoting some of the key elements of it. And what we obviously would be looking for at that point is, no matter which board director people would talk to, we'd all have a pretty good understanding and access to the key elements of the plan, but also help us promote that, because we want it to be the collective plan of the district. And there are going to be people who challenge it. They're going to be questioning it. The state of Minnesota has already been, challenged. And what I personally prefer about their approach is they've made their decision. They've communicated it well. Not everybody's going to agree with everything, but at least people understand. Like I said, you have the documents. This is what we're basing it off of. And they didn't say, hey, kind of nice if you did this. They said, this is an executive order, so, like I said, we all know what that means. So, rolling in, childcare, it begins on March 23rd. And I'm going to kind of read through these so I don't skip any part, and we can ask questions about any part as it comes along here. The district will provide school-age childcare, which means kindergarten to age 12, at Pinecrest from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. That is the mandated time that we have to provide it. And it's for eligible families of emergency workers, and 2 meals are included for each child. We understand that if we surpass the safe holding capacity of Pinecrest, we have 2 options. We can tell people we don't have space available and not take tier 2 or not take staff, the children of staff, or we can expand to the middle school, which is right next door to Pinecrest. That's one of the reasons why we're picking Pinecrest. And we could also expand to other elementary schools. If this goes on long-term and more people need the childcare, we can set it up so that's happening at other schools as well. Because once we do potentially engage in distance learning, then we will have some staff working remotely, which frees up space for the care that we need to provide and the spacing that needs to be done. We intend to honor registrations for both Tiers 1 and Tiers 2, and we're linking it to that because it's the state's wording, and it is a long list. And what if somebody says, well, I'm important to keeping the state moving, I want you to take care of my child. The governor and the commissioner have actually said, if you have space, you can try to do that. And I'm really going to be counting on the board to give feedback on how tight do you want to operate that, because we have advanced registration starting already now, but you know that people aren't always out in front of it, and so Monday will look different than today, and as this potentially goes on longer, those numbers could go up. So I guess I would encourage us to be conservative in how far we spread it, but we've already, as the administrative team, determined or making the recommendation that we should do both Tier 1 and Tier 2 and the children of our employees, because we want the community to continue to function, and we think if we can play a role in that and we have the space and we have enough employees, which we're anticipating, that we should do that. And so there's a link to those categories. Extended childcare is available to emergency workers for a fee from 6:30 to 8 a.m. and 3 to 6 p.m. So 8 to 3 is the mandated time. They encourage us to offer it if we want to, but there is no funding for it. So the recommendation was that we, from our team, is that we charge a fee just like we do for other childcare, because it's a convenience. If the board felt like it's our obligation to give people more time and extend that, and the district is going to pick up the tab for that, that's certainly something that we can discuss at the end of this block here. Service will only be provided in either category for students who are registered. It's an online registration. We need to have people register. If they show up with a child, we'll literally have them sit down and register, because they can't just drop their child off. It might be somebody who doesn't go to our school district. They might have a medical condition. How do we get them home? Who do we call in an emergency? I mean, they can't just, I'm an ambulance driver, take my kid. So we need to have them registered, and the other parts of this plan are built off of that registration. So we believe that's a very critical piece and a very reasonable piece to expect people to do, and maybe critical for safety as well. Transportation is available for eligible students. That is a mandate. If a child care worker who normally gets transportation on a school day, the child of a emergency worker in these categories normally gets transportation to school, we must provide transportation for the 8 to 3 part. We talked about running the routes and picking up the kids that come out to the bus, but based on the registration, which was 38 in climbing, already registered for childcare, and 16, I think, in climbing, already registered asking for the transportation. But that's 25 buses for 16 kids. If it stayed there, would not make a whole lot of sense. So in meeting with Hastings Bus Company officials over the past few days. They've said, you give us names, we'll make your routes, and we'll make it as efficient as possible. We're paying for all the routes anyway, except for the fuel and the mileage, so we're only saving money on that, but it still seems like we're just getting in the way, and we're adding extra expense by running a bunch of buses that we don't need to. So we will literally fill that mandate and transport everybody, but we'll make routes. It's kind of like the summer school model is you kind of put the regular school year apart and you say, who signed up for summer school? Let's make a route. Regular and special needs bus routes will be determined based on registration. So we will also provide those special needs transportations, whether it's a lift bus or an aide riding a bus with the kid, whatever it is that they're entitled to. We just need them to register so that we can get that staff harnessed to do that. So I'll pause at childcare and see what questions we have, and if you want me to repeat the questions, I'll just do that.
The extended childcare that's available to emergency workers, does that refer to both Tier 1 and 2, or simply Tier 1?
We're referring to Tier 1, Tier 2, and also extending it to the children of our own employees, all district employees. Oh, I forgot to repeat the question, sorry. The question was, I was coming up with the answer. The question was, when we refer to providing the transportation, is that Tier 1 and Tier 2, is that everybody participating? Was that right, Director Gergen? Okay. So, and the answer that I started on was, as a district, we're recommending we do Tier 1, Tier 2, and the children of Hastings Public Schools employees. So the transportation would be available to Tier 1 and Tier 2 if they normally get transportation. And children of HPS employees, either they normally get transportation or they don't. They'd fall into one category or another, but they still are eligible for child care. Did I answer the question?
So it would be all the categories. Would be, when we're talking about the extended child care, and I'm getting to, do we charge a fee, do we not charge a fee? I'm trying to understand.
Extended child care is only for Tier 1, Tier 2, and actually our employees fit into Tier 2. We just want to be clear that a paraprofessional who works for us, whose kids go to Stillwater, they understand that we're potentially opening up that umbrella so that they can start making plans. The extended care, even though we're charging a fee, we're only even offering it, we're only even allowed to offer it because it's for emergency workers. We're not allowed to, at this point, we're not allowed to open it up for anybody that needs childcare. They're paying for it, we're providing it. And obviously the reason behind it is what happens if we get too many kids and we're not spacing them out. So they really don't want kids in school at all, that's the whole point, but they understand this compromise of what happens to our world and our response if people just leave work to take care of their kids. And we understand the big gap here is if you have kids that are basically 4 and younger or 3 and younger, you don't have any child care through the school system whatsoever, no matter what your classification is. And that, so hopefully our recommendation is to expand it out to Tier 1 and Tier 2 and to employees to at least create some spots in the private child care world, or to get some burden off the families who in their network, try to find child care. And all of that, did it come up with an answer, Scott? Okay.
Thank you.
Director Herdeen.
Thank you.
We're on TV.
Two things. One is, I appreciate that this was typed moments before the meeting, but I think clarity between those bullets and just say, Tier 1, Tier 2, emergency and essential, like we should name that. We should say, Hastings Public Schools eligible includes, and then just use that language consistently throughout those 4 bullets to resolve the point that Scott was making, and just say, this is what we identify as Hastings Public Schools eligible children. So that's a grammatical, I think, just clarity, name it, include all of those. I appreciate having a link because that could well change. Then an actual question
So let me cover that and then we'll come to the question. So what Director Hedin is suggesting is really going in and clearing up, to be more specific in who we're providing the child care for, what tier 1 and tier 2, give a little bit of a description besides the link as to who that is and how, and the fact that our employees may be a part of tier 2. Some may and some may not, but we want to clarify where they fit in this. Not a good.
Not quite, but almost. It's even more just basic grammar than that. I would say we have 5 bullets on this draft, and I would say very early on in the first bullet, we should say eligible families, Hastings Public School eligible families, parentheses. You could say tier 1 emergency, tier 2 essential, and children of all Hastings Public School employees. End paragraph. So now by definition, Hastings Public School eligible students is that group, and then use that language throughout all 5 bullets. That's all I'm saying for that.
I think you could phrase it as, for the purposes of this document, we are defining Hastings Public Schools eligible, as this, and then launch into it. So, same idea.
So what Scott stated, Director Gergen stated, is even right at the beginning, maybe even prior to the bullet starting or the category starting, is make a definition of eligibility and then use common language throughout the document. And again, this is not speaking to this document because I know it's super draft and it came in moments before the meeting, but just for clarity of who's eligible and who's not.
Yep, so I have a question. So originally in the executive order, and I haven't looked at the most recent update, we were supposed to be checking eligibility. Are we doing that on the registration page, or?
So the question from Director Waite is that the initial guidelines for defining who is emergency workers, that it was outlined that we are supposed to be checking identification. And so in the registration, and I just looked at it, and I can't tell you exactly what it said in there, but I think that they asked that question. What we as a leadership team had suggested was, because it's an emergency and people are scrambling to get this done, that they can provide documentation of all types of sorts. It could be their employment letter. It could be a police officer saying, here's my badge. And it could be somebody showing a pay stub. Look, I got paid by the utility company or whatever it is, because it's a really big, broad list, and we don't believe the intent should be to burden them with all these levels of proof. We understand that somebody could have worked for the utility company last week and they no longer work for them and they showed us their letter. Okay, then you got us. But that's not, that's not our intent. It's going to take a lot of work anyway. So our recommendation is not to create a whole lot more work for the people who are trying to get this emergency care. And also, we're going to have different people coming in and handling this registration. We're going to have different people working with them. It could get complicated, and also they could change the rules on us day by day. So our goal is that they have to verify how they meet those tiers, but we're really open to all common sense ways of showing us. And I know there's a question on the registration, but I don't think that they scan their license or whatever, in that. They're just going to provide us that information, and we under the directive, we have the right to ask for documentation. And Director Gergen.
I just had a question about what our capacity limit is for childcare.
All right, well, that all depends on who you ask. So the question is, what is our capacity for childcare? In our meeting at 2 o'clock today, there were concerns that even at 40 kids showing up, and if we have Pinecrest staff working that first week, are we already running out of space? And the answer is potentially, but when they sign up, they're signing up based on their work schedule. So it could be a firefighter who works 2 all-day shifts and they only need childcare 2 days in the week. So it isn't 40 every day. And of course, we have no idea what the number is going to be Monday or the Wednesday, whatever. So the plan is initially on Monday, just to be safe, Paul Baker is sending some of his staff to work at another elementary school to free up rooms. So they'll be working in the district, they'll be collaborating, but they'll be out of the way. We also may have to coordinate with the middle school staff to say, you guys are working in these areas, we're gonna potentially spread out and use these areas because more kids showed up than they're registered, they just came in and registered, but we didn't know 20 more were shown. So we'll expand, and then to react to that and expand to McAuliffe and Kennedy would be potentially the next step. Also knowing that as it potentially expands, we might also be contracting the number of staff that's actually on site. So it's this big coordination plan, and everybody would like to know exactly what we're doing each day, and it just isn't happening. So the one thing that we've been told and was just reinforced again at 5:30 today is if you can't do it safely, then send your staff home or tell your tier 2 emergency workers you don't have space or whatever it is. So we're gonna try to, all right, the recommendation, once again, I would expect the board to make some formal action if they don't want to follow this recommendation of tier 2 and all staff, so that I could say, well, the board didn't support that, not to put you in a spot, but to understand exactly what Scott is saying. We don't want to get ourselves in a bind. You know, in a perfect world, anybody who needs childcare, if we have the staff, we'd provide it. But we know that if we said anybody, we're bound to surpass our capacity because we talked about school buses today. A full-size school bus can take 12 kids under the current guidelines. You know, I mean, just everything gets thought of differently. And every one of these spaces, this is a great space to spread kids out, but a classroom, literally, even if there wasn't a guideline of 10 or less, if you do the math, it's going to be 10 or less, and some of them not even that. So it's contingency after contingency here with that. Yes, we'll go to Lisa.
My question is about parochial school students, and I know we do some busing to centralized locations for them. To what extent has this been coordinated with parochial schools? And do we as a district have an obligation to support childcare for anybody that might fit these categories?
Okay, so.
And then would you speak up facing that, the computer?
Oh,
The
okay.
people on the computer are having
Okay.
a hard time hearing you. So,
Oh.
so just use a louder voice by the microphone.
I'm trying to focus on the
Facing
answers and not the.
There's a lot in
act.
there.
Okay. Okay. All right, so the question is, what is our obligation and what is our communication with parochial, non-publics, other schools in the district? So we began including them in our communications on Sunday, and they are a part of our Raider update, so that they're seeing our internal communications. We are required for any school, for any eligible child that is enrolled in a program, even if it's not our program. So if we say kindergarten, if they're enrolled in a kindergarten and they live in this school district, kindergarten through 12 years old, we must provide that child care for the families of emergency care workers. If we had open enrolled students who wanted to participate, we would also need to do that. I believe that's the extent of our obligation. So the communication is happening, and regardless of where they normally go to school, it could be a homeschooler. And if they live in our district, they're a registered homeschooler, if they're called to service in those categories, they'd be able to bring their child to the child care.
Go through our registration program process, and then they'd be, okay.
Yeah, and the only, if we support the recommendation, if the board supports the recommendation, the only non-district residents or non-open enrolled students that we would be providing care for are the children of our own employees who live out of district. And the reason why this one came up, and it's a good point to make because it's evolved over time. Yesterday we were saying, go to your own school district where your children go and they will provide it for you. But because it's tier 2, some districts who have already started this today, we're already telling them that your tier 2, we're not doing it. So therefore we'll have employees that can't come because their district won't provide it. So based on our early thoughts, if we have room, we're going to take them. And that, we're making a recommendation. I can't tell you it's the right recommendation because I don't have the crystal ball to see the actual numbers. we would love to help everybody who needs the help and do it properly. I just don't know what those numbers are yet. We do have things in place to literally screen the kids when they get dropped off for symptoms. Our school district nurse, and we'll have assistants out there, as they approach the building, outside, they will be screened. They'll have their temperature taken. They'll be asked a few questions. There'll be communication with the parents, because the whole thing goes south when somebody has to go to work and they drop off a symptomatic kid. And we don't understand all the implications of this, but like I said, the state made their decision and they're sticking with it, and that's better than no decision or a wishy-washy decision. Director Davis.
Dr. Hester, my question is, are we communicating, or can we communicate in such a way that this child care becomes a firewall for families? And by that I mean encouraging them, look at grandparents, look at uncles, aunts. In other words, I don't want this to be like, oh, this is what we're going to do, as opposed to the safer thing, or the more prudent thing being, if you do have family members, if you do have those that can care for your children and keep them out of this situation, wouldn't that be better than having them within any building? So in terms of the numbers, I'm wondering if we're just saying, hey, send them all, or if there's anything being communicated that says, hey, this is an option for you, but you might want to think about X, Y, and Z first. Because I know for a fact there are families that are already saying, well, I'm not doing that. They're going to grandpa's, or whatever happens to be.
So the question from Director Davis is about, is there any way to further communicate that, yes, we are mandated to offer this, but it is not necessarily automatically your best choice. We're not encouraging you to do it. We're just making it available and living up to our part of the plan. And my response to that would be, we are communicating it because we're under this executive order to do that. It's not one of the elements that we're going to promote, like the nutrition and the participation in distance learning, and we'll talk about those in a moment. We really want to, I think we should really promote those. This is just, we need to communicate it in the spirit of this executive order. I will tell you, not an attorney, but if we had attorneys analyze this, they would say that we are forbidden from doing anything that would create a chilling effect. And they would use that term, I'm quite confident because I've seen it many times, create a chilling effect on the participation. If we give them the cold shoulder that, yeah, we got this, but don't bring your kids, yeah, we could be held accountable. And because we're in a pandemic crisis response, I don't know who's going to get around to holding anybody accountable on any of this stuff, but that's not why we're in these positions to make decisions based on would we get caught or would we not get caught? Would there be a penalty or not be a penalty? Really, this whole meeting is about, do you think our plan is fulfilling the spirit of it and the letter of it? And also, is there anything else that we're missing? Or like you have highlighted, there are things we should emphasize and promote, and there are things who we do a great job of, but we literally aren't saying come away from your grandparents who are supervising you because, we've got 2 meals a day and outdoor playtime and what, we literally only want who needs that service. And I said, this is a true decision. Do we expand it to Tier 2 and to employees' kids? That is not a decision that's been made yet. That's one that would have to be supported tonight or action to stop that tonight so that we're communicating the right thing tomorrow. We don't want to get it all out there and say, whoa, we're not so sure about that. So does that answer the question? Okay.
I have one more question that
All right.
pivots a little bit. In terms of communication, I'm thinking of communication with parents. Since Hastings Bus Company is going to assist us with, you tell us who registered, we'll figure out the route. Is there some type of deadline so that Hastings Bus Company has time to figure out the route and for us to communicate the route?
Yes, literally, we're operating on like a 24-hour rule or whatever is like, you can't tell us that, we can't provide transportation that day. And if you tell us, if you call and leave a message at 6 o'clock at night, we'll confirm their transportation because they have no idea what bus is picking them up, what time it's picking them up. So when they get that confirmation, then they know they're getting it. That, I believe, lives up to the spirit of this directive. And I don't think that we're hindering ourselves by that. If we ran all the routes, they'd still have to find out, they'd still want to know, okay, we ran the route and we had 10 kids. and now 10 more families jumped on and just showed up at the route, even if it's their regular route, we no longer can fit you on the bus. So the more we thought about it, we went away from running all the routes to let's design the routes as we get the kids, because like I said, if we're at, let's say 20 kids tomorrow or 30 kids on Monday, that's still more efficient to run buses based on their addresses. We have all the buses we need. We have 25 of them ready to go, but to not run 25 and go around pickup, we'll never get, probably never likely to go over capacity, but we don't know that. Certain neighborhoods could go over capacity. Okay, Director Hadid,
To
I'll come back
Brian's
to you.
point,
Okay.
just for clarity, on that transportation bullet, then we should just say, transportation will be provided 24 hours after registration. So that a family, or whatever that sounds like, so a family understands. If they register on Sunday night at 7 o'clock, they're not going to be in a place to get transportation that next morning.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I would further modify it to maybe talk about after confirmation, because if we say 24 hours, we may not be able to do it. And then all of a sudden, somebody's got a 24-hour thing that it's like after confirmation. One nice thing about the bus company, other than they're great to work with, is they have all the people, they have all their employees that are normally out doing all these things. Now they're not all doing them, but they're getting paid and they're reporting to work if they're healthy. So literally, you can expect the response time to be super quick. You can, we anticipate that anything we don't know about, oh my gosh, we got to run some more meals over to a school X. We call them and then a bus will go deliver it for us. If we need hot spots in neighborhoods, we literally have buses that could be parked in an apartment complex or in a neighborhood or whatever, and so kids could have internet access. If the city, and we talked about this last night, we had a couple directors here that were there last night, 3, that if the city needed buses to run something around, it could be anything from sandbags if we have weather-related issues during the run of this, or they got a shipment of something that needs to get across town, or they need to run city staff somewhere, whatever, like call them up. There are buses, we paid for them, take them and go. They're all a part of this community response, and I think it's a really nice deal, and that's one of the things that's good about this executive order is it says everybody gets paid, so we stop having the discussion about who gets paid. Everybody gets paid. Now let's find something that for everybody to do to chip in, and many of the things we don't even know what they are. By the time this is all done, virtually everybody at the bus company, everybody in the school district, and many other associated people will have done duties that they've never done before. I know that. That's the only thing I know, but I know that part. Okay, so childcare, other questions?
Just going to say, an added level of difficulty, I assume they're figuring out how to do distance learning with the children in childcare and what that would look like, because obviously if someone is supervising more children, I mean, I'll be working with 2 kids at home, but obviously a staff member would have more than that, and so trying to figure out, what that would look like.
So Director Waits is asking the question of if we have students in childcare and then the distance learning begins, that will look different, and we'll have to accommodate that. I can tell you that anybody who's been a part of the childcare, emergency worker childcare discussion so far is anxiously awaiting the distance learning to start, because they could have kids from, let's say a firefighter who works, or a police officer, whoever, National Guard person who's deployed, whatever. I mean, you could literally have their child from 6:30 to 6. That's a long day. How much interesting stuff can you do in small groups spaced out? The distance learning gives them something to do, and we can shift people around to who's going to work with the preschoolers or the kindergartners on their distance learning. Somebody who likes that and somebody who's good at that. Who's going to help the high schoolers, or not high schoolers, but the 12-year-olds with their science work or the book they're reading that's got a lot of big words in it. Somebody who likes that. That's what we're going to morph around into as that evolves. Does this make sense? Okay. All right. Childcare.
Do we know what the fee would be? The 6:30 to 8 a.m. and then the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m.?
Yeah, that's in there.
Okay, so if we need the exact amount, Director Gergen is asking what is the fee? And the fee is only for 6:30 to 8, and then 3 to 6, and that's probably the standard fee.
Yep, so from 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. is $9.25,
Morning is $9.25 per day,
and the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. is $12.25.
and the afternoon is $12.25 per day. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't specifically indicated, but I'm pretty sure they just took their regular childcare rate. And that, once again, that's a recommendation that we're making. The board could say, just waive the fee, but then we are paying that staff for that extended time with zero revenue coming in from the state, which is not out of the question. It's just, we have to look at it differently. Whereas 8 to 3, that's our regular staff that have to report and that we're required to pay. And so we can shift people around and cover that. It's going to end up somewhat cost neutral.
Did you raise your hand at some point? It disappeared?
It disappeared. It disappeared because I asked my question, but now I have another, like, procedural one, which is, are we then, I've heard Dr. Pesta say a number of times, if you agree, if you agree, if you agree. Are we looking for a general head nod at this point on the childcare piece, or is that going to happen later in the meeting? Is it formal motion and approval? Procedurally, how does that happen?
When we finish this recommendation, okay, so the question from Director Hedin was, what are we doing with this recommendation? Are we going to turn it into an action item and take a vote on it? And my recommendation, once again, uncharted territories, is we're preparing this recommendation because we needed to use the time that we had available, and we pulled an emergency meeting together, is that we want the board to be informed. We want them to be supportive of whatever plan we put in place, and that requires them knowing about it and to be ambassadors for the district, because you're now in a kind of a different governance role than you normally are. It's the governor kind of took over, so there's not a whole lot to decide in some parts of this. But I would say, because it's an executive order, I can just prepare a recommendation and follow through with it unless the board acts to change it. I'm going to leave that to the chair and to the board to figure out, or do you want to make that formal action to support parts of this, even though it may not be required, just to show that that outward symbol that the board is supporting these things. And we could do them one at a time or the whole recommendation. There's more coming. This is just all we have, because we're looking at what do we have to have ready by the 23rd and what do we have to have ready by the 30th. And so really what we're talking about tonight is the 23rd stuff. That's what we have to be ready for tomorrow. The 30th, we don't even know if we're doing it yet. We just anticipate it.
Dr. Pesha, I would say that I would make a recommendation that the school board supports the directive that's been laid out, with the exception what Director Hedin had stated about the caveat for the header verbiage added to that. I would make that a motion, looking for support of this resolution to bring this portion forward.
So I'll repeat that and then we continue the discussion. So Director Pemble is making a formal motion to support the child care portion of this recommendation with the suggestions for editing that have been made in the meeting, and hopefully Becky's been pulling those in. Otherwise, I'll probably remember them all exactly as you made them, or I'll be watching the replay. So, okay, so that is a motion that you are putting on the table, and I'll turn over to the chair to take it from there then with the motion.
So I guess my input would be, I would be slightly concerned about making it a formal motion to approve of this exactly as it is here, just because
Kelsey,
I
could
think
you
that...
move to the mic?
Oh.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, I was just saying, in my opinion, I would be slightly hesitant on making it a formal motion just because of how quickly guidance is changing, and I don't want it to appear that we can't then break away from something that the board has said or anything like that, and making sure that our administrators can have the flexibility that they need to change the plan should they need to. But that's if someone wants to second Dave's motion, we are also,
Have we fully vetted the tier 1, tier 2 component? Because one of the things Dr. Pescher referenced was, do we want to allow for tier 2 versus tier 1? Is that part of what we're talking about here?
that would be part of it. We've talked about the tier 1, tier 2 versus the cost, and if we wanted to do a cost and things like that, we're looking at the recommendation from the board. I would like to see us supporting anyone who needs it, that we're able to give that support to. As the wife of a utility worker who I know has to be there all the time, not that I'm going to use the childcare because I can be home, but knowing that there are families like that and understanding those crazy schedules and the criticalness of those jobs, I would like to work on supporting them too if we have the space.
I also support the tier 1, tier 2 setup that is described here. I am not supportive of the fee for early and late childcare for these groups. You know, just doing some quick math, $21.50 per child per day if they utilize that altogether, multiplied by, you know, if it's 50 children, that's approximately $1,000 per day. We have approximately 50 days left in the school year. In no way am I saying that this is going to take place for the remainder of the school year, but in these uncertain times, I think we need to look at what in this case, the worst case scenario would be.
So Director Gergen, just to repeat, was saying that he does not approve or does not agree with the fee for the before and after childcare, just because we don't know how long this will be going, and this could really add up for those workers. I would agree. I think that a lot of the emergency care workers also have weird shifts, and so maybe they work 6 to noon, and so then they're getting charged for this bit down here. They work a later swing shift or something like that, and allowing the flexibility with these critical workers, I think, is important. Oh, I have to be louder even with a microphone. I will try. Okay.
Qualify a little bit of the discussion here. Obviously, and I think that it would be a wonderful thing to support those emergency workers and not charge a fee. What Carrie Gore would remind everybody is it will lead to a transfer from the general fund to community ed because she's responsible for keeping a balanced budget there. I'm sure you all figured that part out. The other part just to be aware of, because it's an unknown, is if you do make it a free service and it does raise the participation level, it may be a little bit challenging to staff that because it's at those bookends, and there are people going to say, I'm not available myself because I normally work 8 to 3 or whatever their hours are, and I've got my own kids to deal with. And I guess, you know, if we do it free, we'd have to understand that when we reach capacity, even though it's free, we can't take any more. That'd be the one thing that I would ask, is that we still be able to put a limit on it even though it's free, so we don't get where we're not doing a good job of providing care, or we're unsafe, which is running contrary to the whole concept. So that'd just be one.
Could we cut the fee in half? Or
How
do a
about,
compromise?
could we say that the fee is subject to, you know, cases in need?
So comments about cutting the fee in half or looking at what are the needs of the family. I guess I probably should backtrack and say, when I said if we make it free, there's a limit on how many we can take. There's a limit on how many we can take anyway. So I guess even though you might make it fill up faster, we're still going to hit that same maximum that we don't even know yet on our staff availability. And if we hit a maximum, we have to stop, whether it was free or not. So I guess if we stick to that guideline, which is part of the mandate, is you can't do it unsafely, I think we're okay going for any rate. Just like I said, knowing that then it's a general fund cost for whatever we cover.
I concur with Scott that the intent of the executive order, I believe, is, on this component, is the public school system will support the rest of the workforce, the rest of the essential and emergency workforce. And they don't work 8 to 3. And to the extent that we can make ourselves available, I completely support Tier 1, Tier 2, children of Hastings Public Schools employees, and having no fee on extended day, acknowledging that at the base we have to be safe. We have to be safe. We have to do that extended day and the standard day childcare safely, and we don't know what those guidelines are right now. We know what they are today, we don't know what they'll be tomorrow, and we need to make that our general consensus. I have some of the same reservations as Kelsey about a formal statement, because I want it to be flexible. I do agree with something that looks like a general head nod, or a we're in general concurrence with the direction. I would like to make sure everybody's got their head nodding on that.
That was kind of how I put it as a resolution.
So Director Hedin,
resolutions make me nervous.
Was a summary of her comments is that she's very much in favor of providing free childcare to the extent that we can do it safely up to our maximum capacity to support the emergency workforce. She's somewhat hesitant about making it into a actual formal board action or board motion, and Director Pemble was suggesting that possibly it would be in the form of a resolution supporting our general plan, and I'm just going to lead a little bit that maybe supporting the plan presented tonight and enabling our leadership team to make refinements according to changes that come from the state.
I buy that. I would, yes, because I would like a general sense that we support the direction, acknowledging that there will be additional guidance and changes. So if we are stating we support this direction, I can support that.
Yep. And we may find out the first week
Right,
that our
that it
plan is
changes even
completely
tomorrow.
redone because it didn't work the way we thought it would, so.
Right.
So the directors Hedin, Waits, and Pemble are expressing some agreement to that concept of perhaps at the end a resolution with a general support and direction for the administration to carry out the heart of this plan.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, any other child care questions before we move to meal service? I think meal service will be less controversial, but I've been wrong before. Anything else? Okay, we'll go with the meal service, which is scheduled to begin March 23rd, and that is part of the executive order. That is one of the main reasons voiced over and over again by key education officials and government officials. Their hesitancy to even close schools is to impact child nutrition. So, of course, we come up with a compromise, and one of the things in their compromise is we begin to offer meals on March 23rd. So here are the bullet points of the plan that we are proposing. Students or family members can accept the meals. They started out with a plan that students could only accept the meals. A student had to get the meal in their hands. Then they started to back off on that a little bit and say, well, maybe there's exceptions, whatever. And in talking to Michael Manning, our food service director, the rest of our leadership team, we said, if we're going to stick our neck out somewhere, let's probably do it here and say, if you're at a bus stop waiting because you know that's when the meal is coming and it's an older sibling or it's a parent or grandparent or whoever comes out there to get it, they're getting it because we do not need the student's number, their lunch account number. We just need to keep records to assure that we handed out so many meals and it was based on our plan. So that's why we have the recommendation, students or family members can accept the meals. The meals meet child nutrition requirements and are intended to have an extended storage life to increase the food security throughout the community. Families may make advanced requests for meals that meet special dietary or allergy requirements. So we've already ordered the food, we've already applied for this program, and we are not doing hot meals, which is a whole different thing. As tasty as they are, that's just not going to work. So there will be days they get Crustables sandwiches, fruit and vegetable, milk or juice, and whatever else, and they're literally in they're like field trip lunches. They're in bags. They are going to limit things that are common food restrictions. So they're really careful about being good for a general audience. He said that they don't have peanuts, but there could be Incrustable peanut butter sandwich or whatever that's individually wrapped and labeled so that people should not eat it if they have a peanut allergy or whatever. But he's really trying to streamline that so that it's generally acceptable for people. But if anybody tells us, you know, we're at this address and we want an alternate meal, or we're coming to the high school and an alternate meal and it has to be gluten-free or whatever it is, they will make a meal, you know, 2 meals a day, especially to that dietary request. We just need to hear from people. Otherwise, it's just too big of a logistical thing to drive around with all these different choices and everything. Okay. And the concept that as this potentially goes on longer and longer, we may have food insecurity, not only for the homes that people were concerned already about food insecurity, but what if you have the financial means, but you can't get to the store because you're an emergency worker or whatever? What if you go to the store and they're out of everything you want? We don't know where that's going. Because these things have a long shelf life, I recommend, and our team recommends, that we heavily promote, take the meals, take the fruit and vegetables and sandwiches and milk, put it in your fridge, put it on your shelf, and then you have it at home. It's also your weekend meals too, if you don't have food security on the weekend, or if you can't get to stores. What if we're supposed to avoid going to stores or whatever? You've got something that's nutritious and that will last a long time in your house. So we really want every family to take them. We've ordered the food, and we're going to get reimbursed if they take it. Where the district's potential pitfall could be is we order all this food and nobody takes it because, yeah, you know, we're going to have SpaghettiOs or whatever today. You know, that may be the initial response, but as this goes on, this is going to become more and more valuable. And how it starts out, you know, we won't be doing bus delivery on every route if nobody's taking the meals. And then 3 weeks later, everybody needs a meal and we can't get to the stores. We were trying to alleviate that concern in the district. So our recommendation is to really promote it and to use the buses available to do this. All students on scheduled morning bus routes may receive 2 meals per day, so they get their lunch and their breakfast for the next morning, or use it as snacks, use it for the weekend, use it as your emergency food, whatever you want to do. And they will pick it up at their regular bus stop. The bus routes will run exactly 2 hours later than on a regular school day. We thought about running it at their regular time, which means some kids have to go out there at 6:30 and get their meals. And we thought if we really want to promote this, we better give them a fighting chance at getting their meals. We also think that participating in this, beginning the day that spring break ends, which is the 23rd, is going to start getting kids ready for potential distance learning on the 30th. If they sleep in all next week till noon and get in these habits, which can happen really fast, then how do we get them back out of it? We're encouraging parents, even if they really don't feel like they need the food, send them down to the bus stop and get the food. Have them walk to their school and get the food. It puts some structure in their day. It gets them out. You know, it should be safe. So that's part of the concept here. Students who regularly receive special transportation will get meal delivery at their door. I don't want to plug DoorDash here, but that's what it looks like. We are running based on the special ed team is identifying the students who get special ed transportation, and next week they will literally go to the doors, knock on the doors, because those are kids who have special transportation. They're never left alone at bus time. So they will talk and say, we're giving you a meal today. Would you like us to continue in the future? And they'll adapt those lists. And it's I believe the number is somewhere in the 30s of the kids that we need to go out and do that to. So that's a doable area based on estimates, doable request. Students who live in walking zones are eligible to pick up 2 meals per day by 2 options. They can go to Hastings High School or middle school between 11 and 1 p.m., 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., and a distribution area will be set up near the main entrance. They're talking about a little tent-like structure out on the front sidewalk. You don't even have to get out of your car. They'll hand it to you, or kids could walk over if the high school or the middle school is convenient for them. Kennedy and McAuliffe are another options, and literally certain buses will go when their routes are done, and they'll go park at Kennedy and McAuliffe, and they'll have all the same meals, and they'll stay there about 20 minutes. So we're saying approximately 10. By Monday, they'll get like 10 to 10:30 or 9:45 to 10:50. They'll get whatever once we got those buses actually routed. And we'll say for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I guess we could expand or contract depending on how it goes. We'll tell them walk there, once again, some structure, and get your meals. And it could be somebody associated with the family could come and get those meals. And they get two per kid. We cannot hand out more than 2 per kid because of the reimbursement, and also to make sure that we're not having people stack up on food that eventually does expire its shelf life and whatever. So our grant, federal grant in this case for the summer food program that we're utilizing allows us only to do 2 per day. All right, so those are your, and that will actually, they'll get it from the bus. They'll be handed right out of the bus or right at the door of the bus to people who show up. So that's meal services. Lot of decisions and changes that went into trying to dial this in, but probably not as controversial as how you pull off childcare. So questions about meal service, Director Malm.
2 questions regarding the special dietary or allergy requirements. How are they supposed to contact the school? I'd like to see something, just a little bit of direction on
Good
how
point.
we do
We
that.
put the number to call.
Okay.
It's going to be the support person for food service, Pam Hoffman, but we'll put the number in there. Thanks for pointing that out.
And then, second question is, you had mentioned that if, at first there might be a little bit of hesitancy to get these meals. If, say, this does get extended for however long, can they contact the school to see if the buses will actually stop at that normal location if they hadn't been there for, say, 2 weeks?
They're going to continue, as long as we run the buses, they will go to every bus stop.
They will.
If there's nobody out there, they'll slow down and look around, and then they'll keep going. But whenever somebody's at the bus stop, they will stop, and we're planning on doing that until we have indication that it's not worth doing anymore, if that happens, and we could then start it back up again if it drags on too long. I will tell you, Michael Manning is literally giving us extra time that is beyond his transition plan right now. And so he's been working at Richfield as well, and they are in session. So he said the participation doubled between day one to then 2 days. It's doubled since, and they had no lead time like we're getting. It was literally tomorrow we're doing meals. And so it's doubled. And I probably won't get the numbers right, but something like 180 the first day and 370 the second day or whatever. So he's already ramping up how much food they're putting on the buses. And he is planning on his Richfield numbers as being our starting numbers just for what to pack. But the good news is that he can take the food back at the end of the day. He has 4 hours to get all the food back into proper storage. And we're anticipating within 3 hours, we're back at the high school, putting it back into storage. I didn't repeat your question, but I think the answer made it pretty obvious, I hope. Are you up?
Yep.
Okay.
My question is, as these meals are being made, are they going to be date stamped? Because if the child doesn't take it and all of a sudden it's put in the fridge and the next day comes along, well, here's another one. Well, when was one made versus the other?
Okay. Director Pemble's question was, is the food date stamped in any way, or the meals date stamped in any way? So if they are building up, a food supply, do they know when it's safe to continue to eat and whatnot? So individually packaged items, milk has a stamp on it. Doesn't tell you if it's been in the refrigerator or not. It'll be cold when we give it to them. But if they leave it out, it's going to go bad, and they're going to. You can imagine. You can get a visual of what that looks like. Like sandwiches that are prepared have a date on them. Like a container of peaches would have a date on it, where if we put carrot sticks into a bag, it won't. And so I don't have the exact answer, but I'm anticipating our food service experts, and that's who's making these, is our food service staff, is that they know, what's the worst thing that can happen to a carrot is you see it looking funny or distasteful before you eat it. Whereas if you open up peaches that had a hole in the thing, or they were from 3 years ago or whatever, yeah, you're in for a world of hurt. Mhm.
My question was, you said they were gonna be in bags if they were just written, made today or made on a date, certain date, so that they accumulated that.
I don't have the answer for that. That's a great suggestion. And as I referred to earlier with Michael Manning working at Richfield right now, that's the beauty of being on spring break, is we get 3 days, in some cases 4 days, of watching our neighbors work through all this. And if he finds out that he's got to write dates on the bags or get a sticker that slaps on that we prepare in mass and put on there, I'm sure we'll do that. But all these suggestions are all coming back to everybody. Whoever's not watching now will hear about them tomorrow, so this is good stuff. Director Waits.
So students who pick up at the bus stops are not necessarily only students that ride the bus. It's just any students.
It's the students that ride the bus.
Okay, so what?
Because it's going to their address. So if somebody who doesn't ride the bus showed up there and is standing there, they're getting a meal.
They are,
Yeah,
okay.
but,
Well, there's just, I have an elementary kiddo, and so I know a lot of elementary kiddos don't necessarily do the bus yet, and they do a lot of parent drop-off. And so would those kids still be able to go to where their bus?
yes,
stop
if somebody
is?
was providing care and it wasn't convenient for them to walk to a school and they went to a bus stop, we're not advertising the bus stops, but if they talk around and find out what it is, yeah, they're getting a meal. If a homeschool student or a C student or anybody who's not normally fed by us knows where to go to the bus stop, they can get it. Many schools are just having a couple spots that you have to go to get the meals, starting out this week. Richfield is doing bus delivery because they have a very high need for meals. That's just the demographics of Richfield, whereas some other districts, Northfield, for example, is we park at an elementary school and you must come to the elementary school. Even if you live 15 miles out of town, you want a meal, you got to come to the elementary school. So, like I said, we're paying for our buses, so we're going to start out running them. And like I said, anybody is eligible for it if they live or are open enrolled in our district, including those non-publics. And so if they show up at a bus stop or show up at a school, whatever, they're getting a meal. And we'll count them and we'll request reimbursement. So that part I don't think will be, that's what makes this part simpler than the other part. Director Hedin.
I know the answer to this question, but just for clarity, we spent all that childcare time talking about kindergarten through 12 years old. The food service and nutrition service extends beyond 12 years old. Is that correct?
The question from Director Hedin is, with the food service, are there age limitations or expectations for who gets the food? And I would say the intent of the executive order is school-age children.
Right, so through high school age.
Through high school age, but basically starting for us at kindergarten, because our preschoolers are not in regular school programs. We're not eligible for, the grants that provide the all-day preschool and things like that. The specific grant program, we run programs, but there are specific grant programs that are funded by the state. So we don't have those, so they wouldn't be eligible. But once again, if a parent is there and says, I have 3 children, they're getting 6 meals, and it's up to somebody to find out that there was a kid who was 1 year too young in there that got meals, I don't think that that's going to happen. And it's the federal government is reimbursing these, and we'll thank them for the meals.
I just wanted to be clear to older age middle schoolers and high school age children that it is our intent to provide nutritional service. And we want them, even though they might drive themselves to school normally, we want them to walk to where their bus stop is and get the meal. That we would want to have happen.
And the comment was that we are encouraging all of our ages of students all the way up to 21 in some cases, that they are eligible for the meals. And however, whether they go to a bus stop, go to the school, that we want them to get the meal. It's nutrition, and every age group needs nutrition, and like I said, if there's limited food sources out there, many of our teenagers don't have jobs anymore that they used to have, and now they're not buying their snacks anymore. Well, so we're filling that need, and so we're definitely encouraging people to do that, and they're all eligible. And Michael Manning did say, at Richfield High School, he had like 60, I think it was 56 or 66 or whatever, high school kids the first day pick up meals. So it shows that they're not totally averse to eating. I've never known one that was averse to eating. Sometimes they don't like veggies, but they'll eat carrots if they run out of other stuff. Okay, did we answer, were they satisfactory answers for the questions so far? And then do we have more questions on meal service? All right, and then the last part of this presentation is the simplest one, although you may have questions, and it's simpler because it doesn't have to happen until March 30th, and there is no executive order that says it will happen. It says schools are closed to the 27th. The reason the schools are closed to the 27th is to prepare for the possibility, the distinct possibility of going to distance learning on the 30th. So when that happens, we kick into gear, but we are planning on March 23rd. Our staff is going to be providing childcare and meal service and preparing for distance learning that could start on March 30th. So some of the bullet points: each grade level from preschool to high school will participate in developmentally appropriate distance learning until schools are able to reopen. Specific details on learning management platforms, technology, and expectations will be shared by each school. We got a team that worked on the distance or the e-learning plan that was ready for this year that didn't get put into action as of yet. And they have transferred what they worked on now towards e-learning and towards distance learning and getting it ready for this in advance. And then the full staff comes back and collaborates and puts all their brain power together to come up with these developmentally appropriate distance learning expectations. And elementary will use Seesaw as their primary platform. Preschool, and I'm not sure if it's kindergarten where we draw the line on the Seesaw. It's probably first grade. But they may have paper packets and things like that that get picked up and dropped off. And yes, we can use school buses for that. And then secondary school from, I believe, 5th grade on up is using Schoology. It could be 7th grade on up. But we got these platforms that are identified that they've been using already to enable learning. And so we're not giving them new stuff. We're not saying, go to Khan Academy, go to Google this, go to whatever. Say, we're using those learning platforms. And if we do send you to Khan Academy to practice this algebra function, then it'll be embedded into that learning platform. That's what the platform is for, is to harness and facilitate everything. So we'll be doing that. And older students need different amounts of technology. Some of them have them, some of them don't. Staff will be spending the full week working through that and not only getting the technology out, but determining what else we need. We may be purchasing things that we didn't have. We may go out and purchase 50 more hotspots, who knows? But it's gonna be our instructional experts that tell us what we need, and then we have that luxury of 5 days. If you may recall, we talked about potentially doing before the executive order broke, maybe we should come back out of break and practice e-learning or distance learning and just tell everybody before break we're going to practice it in case we need to start it at a future date. And the response was we need at least a day to switch from weather impacted, short-term e-learning to potentially long-term distance learning. And they felt confident with 1 day. Now we got 5 days. That's 5 times better. And our confidence level is going to increase with each of those 5 days in getting this ready. And then the analogy that I've used with the leadership team is, and some people don't like sports analogies, but I'm going to use it anyway, is if you're playing the game of football, a long touchdown pass is very exciting and a kick return is very exciting, but a 4-yard running play is not super exciting. But if you do 3 4-yard running plays in a row, you get a first down, and if you keep doing that, you get a touchdown. And our touchdown is to get approximately a year's worth of learning no matter what happens, to graduate on time no matter what happens, and try not to extend into the summer. So we're not asking our staff to throw a touchdown pass on the first day. We're not asking our kids to put in 10 hours of work on the first day. We're asking to just start, hand the ball off, and see what happens. But by engaging in it now and consistently as long as they ask us to, we'll be moving towards that goal the best that we can. And at this point, it is by far the best alternative. Just stopping and trying to restart up again, I've never heard anybody in the last 2 weeks think that that was a good idea. So we've got common sense support that says that this is the way to do it, and that we shouldn't try to get them to graduation or get them to learn all their state standards the first week, that we just gotta roll it out. And it will backfire if kids are asked to do too much during the day. So having structure, having free time, having exercise, having chores, and having productive schoolwork, it's all gonna be a part of keeping them going, because everybody knows it's not summer vacation. This is something else. This will get old if it goes on too long. So summer vacation, you just take off and go to the pool and go here and whatever. Well, now they're not living in that world here temporarily, so we're feeling really good about that. The district will receive state funding based on the daily participation rates of students in the distance learning activities. All healthy students are expected to participate under the state compulsory attendance law. There are the same excuses for not participating as there was before, you know, including your health and helping with the emergency at home and whatever it is. Obviously, we're not doing attendance the exact same way, but we are taking attendance. If we don't take attendance, we don't get funded by the state. We are paying all our employees, so we need to be funded by the state. And so our team is dialing in for each grade level, what are the tools they're going to use, how do we facilitate that learning in the technology and the expectations, and how do we do daily attendance so that we can be funded when in this process. We strongly recommend that parents begin providing structure on May 23rd. That's the day that spring break was supposed to end, and it's ending. March 23rd, okay. I have it circled there even, okay. I'm changing it tonight, not tomorrow. March 23rd. By having students participate in meal service and gathering educational materials, this will greatly improve their readiness for distance learning. So, one more week, but this spring break is ending on Monday. We cannot, by executive order, we cannot start distance learning early. We're not allowed to. So we have to wait to the 30th or whenever they tell us. So in that period, it'd be nice to get people off their spring break routine and start getting some structure in the new world in which they're living. And going to get their meal is one thing that they can do. Going and getting their jacket or their topical books that they need out of their locker that they thought they were getting after spring break, whatever, we can bring them into the building under our procedures, get them in to get their stuff. Maybe they have technology that they need to bring from home. Maybe they need to ask for something. We got a week to do that, and we could keep doing it March 30th as well. But why not use this week and just give the kids some structure? And parents are going to need the help too. They're not used to this. My recommendation to any parent is you want to try to get them all fired up on March 30th. That might not be as easy as you think. So start rolling it out. And that's one of the reasons why we're spreading this meal service out, is gives them something to do. No, they don't have to get up at 6:30, but 8:30 or 8:15 or whatever, get out to the bus. And now, if it's March 30th, your teachers are waiting to interact with you. You know, they're standing by to answer questions. They've got videos posted for you. They've got whatever. I mean, that's what they need to get into, because you can imagine how this could fall apart with, I'm just going to be on a screen doing video games or whatever. Their brains will be changed by the time we see them again. So we had a break, and the break will be over on March 23rd. So we encourage people to participate. It will improve their readiness if we start distance learning. So that's looking ahead. Questions about that? And Director Davis?
I've actually got two. My first question is, and this could be happening next week, in terms of IEPs, 504s, et cetera, I'm assuming that the planning around those and the specific accommodation method to be made will be done during the course of next week?
Yes. The question was about students with special needs, IEPs and so forth. How do we make those modifications? That's why staff, it's critical for them to come in or if we do allow some staff for reasons to work remotely, they're still going to be collaborating and working on this because that's a big effort.
Just because you didn't know, Jen Reichel and Dave Haveman are on the Zoom, so if you need any input from them, they are here as well, so.
Okay, so we'll encourage them to flag you down if they are typing in questions or anything like that. But if you do look at the guidelines from the commissioner, following up on the executive order, they go into great detail about what needs to be done for special education, for EL, for 504 plans. And these daily calls that they've been having, about half the questions are about that, about all these federally based deadlines. What about the stuff that was supposed to happen when kids came back, as far as special ed proceedings that we're starting with some students? Okay, there is going to be a little bit of a grace period. What about reviews that need to be done, reevaluations, et cetera? There's a little bit of a grace period there. But ultimately, it's crystal clear that everything that's supposed to happen that is part of free and appropriate public education is supposed to happen in this distance learning format. And it will include everything from speech therapy through video conferencing. It will include a social worker or a counselor, or whatever, calling somebody and talking through what they had been talking to them about. All that kind of stuff will happen. It just will happen in this different alternate universe here, which every challenge is an opportunity, and this is a tremendous challenge. Hopefully, we're successful in providing quality education. Hopefully, our students and families stay safe. When we come out the other end of this, we are going to be a different district, more equipped to do 21st century learning. And it takes something, a catalyst like this, to really leap that far. We're ready to do that, and I have full confidence that we're going to do that. I wish there was some other catalyst other than this, but this is what it's going to be. But when you do look through those guidelines, there's very little wiggle room other than we caused a delay, so we're going to give you some extra time, but then you've got to get right back to everything. And actually, special education, I feel, has been one of those areas that has come up with a lot of creative ways to deliver quality education because of the shortage of staff. They've been forced to come up with alternate methods in many areas over the years. And so they probably got a little bit of jump on how they're going to do this. It's just still very labor intensive, requires the specialists and a lot of planning. And this week, our special ed staff and everybody associated with them has been dialing down to individual kids, because it is not, some of the general instruction is do this by grade level, or they're literally talking about individual kids and how do we give them everything that's in their plan in a different way, or in some cases the same way. So I'm really high confidence level that they're on top of that. And the other beautiful thing that they do, just like other educators, is they collaborate with their peers, they network with other districts, they network with other professionals, and they are already monitoring what the districts that started planning and dealing with things this week, they're already monitoring that, they're already sharing plans. They get on conference calls and they do all that kind of stuff. So I feel that they're in a good position to rise to that challenge.
That's great. Thanks for answering, Jeff. My other question is, in terms of the technology that the educators will be using, Zoom specifically, I know that there's tons of different platforms out there for different things. I am fairly confident there's going to be folks that have never heard of it. I hadn't until last night. So are there going to be pieces in place next week to get educators who have never heard of it or don't know how to access it to get enabled to be able to be effective on it by the time they get through their week of preparation?
That is a really important question. Director Davis was asking about if we were going to utilize the Zoom product for video conferencing, how do we get everybody who needs to use it trained and comfortable with it. And so that is a good opportunity to be a little bit more specific. On Monday morning when we started meeting, I made the suggestion that there's so many great tools for video conferencing, and we don't know which of our staff are going to be available from day to day, especially if this goes on longer. We don't know if if we space people out, we literally could have a staff meeting at the middle school where everybody is in their room and participates in the staff meeting because they shouldn't come in here, or they have a choice of which one to do. And I said, these great products work fairly similar, but they all have their own little specific nuances. And it can be kind of frustrating when every time you do a video conference, it's a different system. I said, let's pick one, and let's make sure we're not just using a free version of something because it's free, but find out if we need to buy a license or something so we can fully implement it for our staff. And so we threw a lot of names around. Zoom came up as one popular one. We did some checking on it, and we've been using it all week. That is not designed for student interaction. Doesn't mean it couldn't be, but as the groups have begun their preliminary work, they've talked about Schoology, which is the secondary's learning platform, has conferencing capabilities built into that. So you wouldn't send them off to go do Zoom when it's right there where we're trying to keep them located. So the Zoom is really for the board, which we're using for Director Beisel tonight to log in, for our leaders to log into this meeting. We could get it set up knowing, okay, who's got FaceTime, who's got Google Hangout, who's got whatever. It's just that we're going to use Zoom, and we're going to make sure that our tech staff supports Zoom and has the appropriate license for it, but that's for staff. It may grow into something that in certain instances gets used for students, but right now the students are sticking to the tools that they've always used.
No, understood. I figured kids in the teacher interaction.
Okay.
Schoology. I was asking about the teachers conferencing or
Got it.
trying to, what's the word, collaborate.
Okay.
The opportunity to collaborate using that so they don't have to be in that same space together, and whether or not they'll be trained up enough during the course of the week to be able to be in different classrooms and be able to still collaborate.
Got you. So Director Davis is asking the more detailed or more clear, more specific follow-up on, is just specifically for staff, that if that's what we're targeting it for, how do we get our staff comfortable and how do we get them the support that they need? By identifying one platform as our best bet, because right away from the start, some people will not be able to come to work on the 23rd. They've already been notified we're using Zoom, so they got a little bit of heads up. They'll be getting directions. We talked about little tutorial videos and things like that to get them up and going. Because our tech staff is only supporting one platform, they don't have to be well-versed in 30 different platforms. When people call in, they can say, yep, Zoom, you do this and you do that, and people can practice it. Those that are coming in on Monday are going to receive training on it. And so, so there's been steps already in how to roll it out. And if we knew, if people were on duty right now and on site, we'd be doing training. But because they're off duty this week, and they may not be on site in some cases next week, it's going to be kind of this layered approach. But absolutely, that like I said, the number one thing is narrow it down to one choice, so that it's simpler to do exactly what you're asking about to accomplish that. And we want people, because we watched Director Haveman sent a funny video today of, yes, we did have time for a couple minutes of laughter about a video about how all this conferencing works and how it changes your world. So we've been going through that this week of, hey, who's not muted? Who's talking? Where are we getting this feedback? And and sometimes we're like coming in and standing in the back of somebody else's office because we couldn't get ours going. It's like, I don't even have a camera. Oh, I'll go in your office. So we're working through that this week, and that'll happen in the buildings this week. It's like, oh, I'm in a video conference from my room. Oh, I don't know how to do it, or I don't have a camera, or I forgot my computer. So then they come back down to the cafeteria and sit over in the corner and participate that way. But each day it will get better. And ultimately, there's going to be this world where it's just kind of our norm. And then when we go back to the real norm, we got another level of comfort in dealing with things. Maybe we don't drive as much. Maybe staff meetings, instead of rushing to get out of your building to get over to place X, you just go in your room and flip on the video. I mean, we're going to be like I said, it's going to change what we do in a positive way. It'd just be nice if we're under different circumstances. But distance learning.
Any other questions? I know I like the creative use of the buses to dropping off the food and potentially bringing paper materials. I think that's a really good use of a system we already have in place. So
All right, so Director Waits was just commenting that using the buses in creative ways she thinks is outstanding. I'm going to just throw up a number here, 10. When we meet in a month, I'm going to tell you 10 ways you never thought that we could use school buses and school bus drivers. And it's probably going to be more. And their game, they're like, we want to work. You know, we're getting paid. We want to work. And okay, so a little, something new and some different ways to get involved in the community. And bus drivers like kids, 99-point-something% of them like kids. So they're going to help out. They're going to have fun with delivering meals and running. I mean, literally, when we drop off a meal, if you're a first grader and you want to hand your packet that you did on your math assignment, you hand it to the person on the bus. That's with there'll be other staff with the bus drivers, and they'll bring it to school and get it to the teacher. I mean, there's all this stuff is going to be. It's a luxury that we have those buses, and like I said, how much we use them will impact our fuel bill and a couple other minor details. But otherwise, they're getting paid and they're ready to go. And a bus, like I said, a bus might be a shelter. A bus might be a hotspot. A bus might be where you turn in your homework. I mean, like I said, I don't even know those next 10 ways. I don't even know what they are yet. So I'm going to wrap up here, and the continuation is if you want to do some type of resolution or support for the plan, and then the last item that you have on the agenda is just because MSBA has released timely guidelines on how board operations may change. That's hard to make any switches when you're all apart, so maybe you want to plan ahead. If this happens or that happens, here's what we'll do or not do. I'll leave that for you guys to sort out.
I have a question, I don't know where it fits, so I'm just going to ask, and then you can tell me if it fits later. I have a question, and it's not specific to the plan, but it's a broader question about communication. I know and I think all the board members have been on the Radar updates the last few days, and there's a similar but not the same update that's showing up on our coronavirus update on the website. But since Sunday night, with the phone call, we haven't had information go out to our public yet. And I realize that that time hasn't been right, but I'd like to understand how we're going to go forward from tonight, kind of consolidating or coordinating the Radar update information, the coronavirus information on the website, and maybe integrating Infinite Campus more, so that we're proactively reaching out to parents, not waiting for people in the community to link onto the website. And we might not have that answer tonight, but I would appreciate in our future updates, I'd like to see that coming forward.
So part of the internal communications is because we're on break, and the Infinite Campus it's so hard to pull information back. We've changed everything that you just heard how many times, I can't even tell you this week, either because the state changed it or because we worked our way to a better mousetrap. So we didn't want to be doing those Infinite Campus, that official. We want people to pay attention when we send out an Infinite Campus. If we send out the temperature every day, that people would stop looking at them. So we wanted to have stuff that they lock into and talk to each other and prepare. We weren't ready for that yet. Once we have feedback from the board, which we're getting on how to update this plan tonight, the plan would be that a document that looks like this goes out through Infinite Campus to get this process started. And then there may be some district-wide communications on Infinite Campus moving forward, and we're going to really reserve that for these really critical things where we stop what you're doing and listen to me right now. Otherwise, we want it to come from the programs, the schools and the program. So that would be customized for what they're doing, because it's not one size fits all, and it's really powerful coming from the people who actually know what they're talking about rather than the person who's trying to make a general statement. And so we've even talked about any communication. If it's about health, if it's about something that we really want your attention on, universal precautions or whatever that we want people to do, or social distancing. We want it to come from the nurse, so that credibility of registered nurse, registered school district nurse. Mary Ellen Fox said this. Today we talked about the psychological aspect of not only don't kids have a reference for where to put this in, their parents don't, and you got to get into their grandparents' age before they can say, yeah, I remember we did something like that before. This is quite different. So we want to have our student support team, and actually it's elements of the crisis team that's in place, come together across the developmental stages and come up with guidance for students and for parents to help them with that. So that will come perhaps from Infinite Campus as one message out, but it will come from that support team. So that's, we're putting their professional credentials on the line, and when they hear from me when it comes to this, it's more about the logistics of the bus will run or it won't run. We're opening the school or won't school, so that we get, like I said, I used this example the other day. I heard it on the radio that in the last financial crisis in 2008, the Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker said, when you're in a crisis, the only thing you have is credibility. It's too late to build it. It's too late to baffle and dazzle people with plans, where it's like they're going to listen to you if you have credibility. So when we say our school nurse or our counselors or our principals, they're putting their credibility on that. So we're really going to target those messages from them. And then there'll be daily, continuous communication between the teachers and educational staff and their students, obviously through our platforms. But that Infinite Campus and that formal part, and you're right, Director Hedin, it's going to be evolving, but that's kind of where we literally wrapped up our afternoon meeting talking about how we'll communicate out. And like I said, this is an Infinite Campus, and social media and website and newspaper, radio. This is going out tomorrow, and that. Okay, we'll catch Director Davis first and come back.
Dr. Bashir, I think that as long as we do communicate what we have to, per least suggestion, and say, as of this time, this date, so on and so forth, for the most updated information, and refer them back to the website. I mean, for example, right now, we're up to what, the 17th on here, so it's staying pretty current. I think that if we just say, as of this is what we know, here's on Infinite Campus, for the most up-to-date, always refer back to our website, and it's always all going to be there, as long as we keep up with it.
Yep, and that goes to the whole concept of hot linking and everything, because even when it's in the timeline, that's over. You know, I mean, you can go back and look at it to build the story, but it's over because somebody changed something on us. So the website, even though, because people got their hands in so many projects right now, you can't even have anybody update everything instantaneously, but every day we're making sure that the website is updated. And like I said, when you have the link in there, when somebody who created it changes it, it changes with it. And it's been a good exercise in thinking about time. I mean, time is a whole different element right now.
I was just going to make a suggestion of pinning a post to the top of our Facebook
Like the
news
school
feed
closing?
that just says, click here for the most up-to-date
Okay.
information. So it's
like
always
that.
right there at the top instead of falling down.
That's a great
So Director Waits was asking if we could pin a post at the top, and we do, when we have school closing announcements, we put them at the top, banner, so we can make that correction. And we also talked about the way our website is set up. You can have 3 images there with announcements, and you can replace them, but we decided that somebody in a lab coat with a stethoscope with no actual head, that we're just going to keep using that image because people will get used to, I want to know about COVID-19 response, click on that one. But the banner is an excellent idea as well.
Just very quickly, Dr. Bashir. Just a general comment. Thank you and your staff and the community for all the efforts that you have put into this. I know you've probably gotten, maybe 2 hours of sleep in a week. So this is not something that we could have planned for, and it would have been very easy to just buckle, and you haven't. And it gives me hope for what is to come. So thank you.
So repeating Director Malm's statement about thank you to the staff and the leadership team, especially the leadership team that has been reporting during the break. for staying on top of things and being progressive. You know more than I do because you've been here longer than me. We have a great leadership team. We have great district office staff that is, playing their part in there. And our teachers and instructional staff that are on break have not really, other than a few that have ventured out, have not been pushed yet. They'll be challenged on Monday. And we want to do that eustress thing where a little bit of stress helps bring out the best in them, but we don't want to put them into distress because short term you can maybe get results, but over weeks you don't really get results with putting that constant stress on them. And we understand that we have an educational objective for this district, and it overlaps into the community, but they have their own personal lives. They may have a loved one who's going through health issues. They may have a partner or family member that is literally meeting people in the parking lot of the hospital. My wife is doing that. She went from same-day surgery to ER because they cancel same-day surgeries. Now she's out there screening the people who are coming in saying, I got everything and anything. That's a big change. So all of our staff have that in their life too, and we're trying to find that balance. And that was a big part of the battle that was going on in that conversation today with the commissioner, with all the superintendents in the state, is what if people say our rest of our life is important and we're not even going to participate in your school thing? And her reference back was, it's an executive order. Yes, people have options. If they say, well, in the other district they do this, may I remind you, you work in this district. So, we'll have some challenges like that. But once again, our educational staff better than I do from your experience, and you probably have a very high confidence level they're going to be ready to go on this. They know the date to show up, and so we'll take it from there. We're just trying to get that preliminary stuff ready for them so that they can be successful and not have to deal with all these other logistical things. They can get right down to their specialty. Or learn a new specialty. So thank you for that.
Okay, so I'll take this part. So then the last bit, and I've still got this up, so if you raise your hand, I'll know. The last bit to talk about tonight is figuring out what the school board wants to do moving forward. For our meetings, do we want to move to teleconferencing? Do we want to do this? As of today, the governor did release guidance that said we can meet teleconferencing, and originally we had to have at least one person in attendance in a public place, and they've now said that that's not the case, that it can all be done through teleconferencing, and we could try to work with, say, having community members be able to phone in and hear it or see it. We could work with Community TV to see if they can somehow stream whatever is on the screen, something like that. That's a discussion we need to have. We're supposed to have a board meeting next week, a regular board meeting, and then we're also supposed to have an MSBA meeting regarding the superintendent search, which I have spoken to MSBA, and they are ready to take that digital if we want. They have no issue with that, and I don't know, Becky and I talked to them for about an hour today figuring out going forward how all of this can work and how we can make each piece of our superintendent search work. One idea, if we do stream the community Q&As, since everyone's kind of stuck at home, we may get more people to kind of tune in and see what's going on, which is a plus. But anyway, these are all ideas we're working on. So as a board, do you have thoughts on what you would like to do? Scott?
I think it's tough. I think we need to honor those that are on the teleconference, because it is extremely tough to be the only person on a teleconference when the other people are present in the room. So I think we need to go one way or the other. I don't think a mix is effective. I think it's slighting to the people that are not in the room.
I can speak to that from our last week's meeting. It was difficult to make that interaction work well, because on one hand, you weren't hearing the complete statement or question or the complete answer, and that was difficult, but I think we need to look ahead and say, you know, as this progresses, if it does, we need to give ourselves an option that we can say we're going to teleconference as a group totally.
Yes. But by far, any day of the week, I prefer in person. Absolutely, positively, especially with this group. But if we can't all be here, I think it's really, really tough on the people that are not in the room.
So Director Gergen is just saying that he prefers face-to-face, in general, that face-to-face interactions are much better. However, we also want to recognize that not all board members and administrators and such can be present at the meetings, especially as we talk about needing to limit community involvement and how many people can be in a room. And so recognizing how difficult that is, Becky Beisel is currently on quarantine, and so she is in through a teleconference today, and that it's much more difficult to have pieces. So either do all teleconference or all in person and go from there. So, Becky.
Becky just talked in the chat. I don't know if she's gonna unmute herself. But she just said that she thinks that we should take it day to day since every day things are changing. So that was her comment.
Thank you, Becky. I would say if we do, I like that plan, Scott. I think that is fantastic. It's either all one way or the other. If we do all teleconference, we absolutely need to come up with some sort of etiquette rules so that there is order. So that way when we go into this meeting, there's a known expectation on what will happen.
So Director Malm was just saying that if we move to teleconferencing, we need to come up with some ways to keep order. Becky and I had spoken about that a little bit today, that I think Board Book gives us that. If I weren't standing up here, I could be seeing if people were raising their hands, and so then we can do it that way so we're not all talking over each other, and we would know when someone has something to say. So I think Board Book is going to help us a lot should we choose to go this direction. Scott.
Most teleconferencing applications, like whether it be Zoom or Skype or WebEx, have that same feature built into it. Yeah. And some of them you can even record both the audio and any screen display. So, yeah, oftentimes that's a premium feature. So just, there's certainly ways around this.
So Scott was just saying that a lot of the teleconferencing apps allow you to do that very same thing, so we should have some flexibility here. MSBA does say if we do want to move to teleconferencing, we will have to take that action at a board meeting. And so if that's something, if we can, and I'm not sure if we can take an action tonight, Superintendent Peshta, just to say that should it come up, to give us the flexibility to make that call if things change before a board meeting next week, or how we want to go forward with that.
She didn't say it needed to be like a formal action. Just
Well, their guidance here says so.
That's what it was today, too.
Yeah, on their, whatever their document is. Scott?
If it is a formal action, that's fine. I know we have a special meeting coming up, okay? I think we can do better than having.
Okay. All right, do we have any more discussion on it? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign?
I heard Becky did that.
Yeah.
Did we get a
Okay.
second?
We did,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Motion carries.
Point of clarification, we should post, if everything lines up that we can get, we should post these next two meetings to be at the high school lecture. We have to do a public posting, they're not emergency meetings. We say it's in the lecture room and we set up all the.
If that feels, if you go back with your administrative leadership and they say, yeah, that's the best place.
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to Missy to just double check,
Yeah.
so when
I
she
mean, maybe
gives
there's
us.
a place we're not thinking of right now.
Whatever the best.
Find the best
location
place and
available.
go ahead and schedule
Yep.
it so we can get the
Yep.
posting out.
Yes.
And then people will participate in one of the two
Postings are out,
formats.
we just need to
Agreed.
change the location, probably.
Got it, because they're right around the corner, so I want to make sure.
For those who couldn't hear, we're just trying to determine the location for the meetings next week, and that is to be determined at the moment once administration can figure out what the best solution would be for that. Okay. So then at this point, that's all of our discussion items.
Do you want to come back to a
Yeah, we should
some
give something
formal
of support.
Statement of support.
statement
Yeah.
or resolution statement, whatever that just
Okay.
gives us a
I'll make
extra
a,
boost?
not a resolution, as Director Hadeen doesn't like resolutions, but
I don't like action.
I'll say, an action item or an
No, I said I
action.
don't like action. I like statements of support.
Okay, let me rephrase. I would say that the board supports a motion or a statement of support for what the staff have put together so far and what will have to be changed as we move forward. Is that broad enough?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would have said yes regardless of the
Oh.
name. I just don't want to put I want to make sure, and I think Kelsey agrees, we don't want a box
Right.
Right.
that frames us into today. But we
Yeah.
want to say, yes, this is going the right direction.
Yeah.
This
So-
is going a great direction, actually.
Director Pemble is moving for a, do we have to motion for a statement of support? Making a statement of support that
board
that
makes a statement of support.
yes, the board is making a statement of support.
And I think you could say how many other board members endorsed his statement of support.
There you go.
In some way other
Yeah.
than vote.
Okay, so how many board members would support Dave's statement of support for the plan that the administration has come up with and understanding that there will be flexibility moving forward? Okay, yep. All right.
We're all raising our hands, Becky.
All right, so the board is unanimously supporting Dave's statement of support. So,
All right, I know it sounds hokey, but the people who've been working on it this week, to hear you say, keep on going, I think
Yep.
is
That's
their
the
best
important
reward.
yeah,
Thank you.
Message to move.
yeah, we have some wonderful staff, and I'm just so happy that they're in our district, and they're a great team to be working on this, and they give me a lot of confidence as we move forward, so. Okay, is there anything else for discussion? All right, so at this point, we can have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, well, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, so meeting is adjourned. Oh, no gavel. There we go. I know. I didn't bring it up with me.
Yep. You gotta hit it harder.
Yeah, I'll have my kids teach me how to hit the gavel really hard.